Recording?
Yes, I am. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. All right, well, it's just a hair before 1, so we'll say it's 1, and we'll call to order the December 7th, 2020 meeting of the Albemarle County Architectural Review Board. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with Ordinance 20A14 and Ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. We have a quorum present. Architectural Review Board members present electronically are myself, Frank Stoner, Fred Missel, and Frank Hancock. There are opportunities for public access to this meeting posted on the county's website and calendar. Public has real-time audio-visual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over the phone, both as provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the county's website. This online meeting and any associated chats are a public record and are subject to disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act. We have a number of applicants and project representatives attending today. Carolyn Schaefer, our recording secretary, may need to contact you during this meeting, so please check the chat box and respond as necessary. For all speakers, when it's your turn to speak, please first state your name for the record. And for those participating, when you're not speaking, please keep your microphone muted. For applicants making presentations, note that the presentation will be limited to a total of 15 minutes, which you can divide among team members. Carolyn will let us know when the time is up. So we'll move on to disclosures. Do any board members have disclosures today?
No.
No.
No disclosure.
Great. And it's not on our official agenda, but the next item will be public comment. We're going to permit that as well at the electronic meetings. Are there any members of the public wishing to comment on matters not on the agenda?
I do not have anybody with their hand up at this time.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. We have nothing on the consent agenda or work session, so we'll move to the regular review items. We have 3 items scheduled for regular review today. Chris Taggart and Margaret Malazewski from the Planning Division of Community Development will be presenting these items today. The first item is ARB 2020-108 Airport Road Cheats Final Site Plan. Chris, may we have your presentation?
Yes, thanks, Dave. Are you all viewing the correct screen?
We can see your preview and speaker notes.
Okay. Let me swap that. How about now?
I think that's it.
All right, thank you. The application I'm presenting on today is the review of the architecture and final site plan to construct a fuel station that includes a convenience store, fuel pump canopy, and a car wash, in addition to associated site improvements. The subject property is located on the northwest corner of the Route 29 Airport Road intersection. The ARB did not recommend approval of the initial site plan during the June 1st ARB meeting, primarily due to the proposed locations of the store building and fuel pump canopy. A work session was held on July 6th regarding the issues identified with the site plan, where the ARB determined that the general site layout originally proposed was acceptable. The revised initial site plan was approved by the ARB on September 21st. The landscape plan has been revised to show additional ornamental trees along the Route 29 Airport Road frontages, along the north end of the car wash travelway, and between the stormwater feature visible from Route 29 in the adjacent site. Around the proposed stormwater features, additional shrubs and ornamentals have been provided to better integrate the features into the site. Regarding the fuel pump canopy, the roof design has been revised so that the tallest side faces the store building. On the store side of the canopy, the height is just over 21 feet. On the Route 29 side, the height is just over 18 feet, 6 inches taller than the guidelines maximum. Staff is recommending that the canopy be reduced overall by 6 inches to meet the 17-foot 6-inch maximum requirement. Regarding the site lighting, the lighting plan has been revised so the fuel pump canopy lighting does not exceed 30-foot candles and the remaining site lighting does not exceed 20-foot candles. However, a maintenance factor of less than 1 is used for canopy, building, and site lighting. Staff is recommending that the lighting plan be revised to use maintenance factors of at least 1 and ensure that the maximum foot candle value does not exceed 30-foot candles under the canopy and 20-foot candles everywhere else on site. Further changes have been made to the architectural design with the submission. The store elevations visible from Airport Road have been revised to extended stone veneer from the west elevation around the corner to a portion of the south elevation. However, the southwest corner still has an uncoordinated appearance because the material is not consistent throughout that building element. So staff is recommending to continue the stone veneer on all 3 sides of the bump out and to make the height of the entire bump out consistent to establish a more cohesive appearance when viewing the west and south elevations together. Regarding the elevations visible from Route 29, the windows on this elevation north of entrance have been extended down to the cast stone seal and are now consistent with storefront windows on the south elevation. However, no change has been made to the tower. When viewed from both Route 29 northbound and Airport Road, the bump out on the southwest corner of the store is more prominent than the tower. Revising the tower to project out from the elevation and increasing its height relative to the southwest corner would achieve a more traditional appearance and increase the tower's prominence. Regarding the car wash and associated equipment, details of the air pumps and vacuums have been provided, but the locations have not been indicated on the site plan. The equipment will need to be located to eliminate visibility and screened with landscaping invisible from the entrance corridor. Regarding the signage, the monument signage has been revised to incorporate the sheet signage with the base and gas pricing, resulting in a more appropriate appearance. However, the architectural drawings still show cabinet-style signs along the east and south elevations of the store building and along the north, south, and east elevations of the fuel pump canopy. While signage is reviewed and approved with a separate application, staff interprets the guidelines to mean cabinet-style signs are not approvable for wall signage. However, if the ARB has an alternate interpretation, it would help the future sign review process if we can have that information today. Lastly, the design appears to propose 4 colors. Reducing the number of colors proposed in the signs to a maximum of 3 would be appropriate. Staff is recommending approval of the final site plans with the revisions detailed in the staff report. Staff is also recommending that the issue of the design in the southwest corner be reviewed by the ARB during a future work session prior to final approval. I would be happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Thank you, Chris. Frank Hancock, any questions for staff?
Thanks, Chris. No, I don't have any questions at this time.
Frank Stoner?
No, I don't have any either, Dave.
Okay. Fred?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Very good report, Chris. None from me either. So we'll turn to the applicant now.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's Lee May, Engineering Permit Manager with Sheets. It's good to see everybody again. I'll share my screen for a quick presentation. All right, hopefully everybody can see my screen with the site plan. Okay. So kind of a few changes here where we did what we could to move the building closer to Airport Road. As Chris mentioned in his report, we moved it several feet closer. Part of the reason we were kind of up against a turning radius for the delivery trucks, and that made it difficult to bring those parking spaces and drive out further down. Also mentioned that, of course, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. For some of the elements on the site, we have, our car wash teller is back here, which we'll see later. The car wash menu board is right next to that. And it was an omission on the drawing was the air and vac station as well. Of course, we have the drive-through elements, we have the order point, and then the order board for the drive-through. Moving on to the next one. What I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna hit the lighting real quick. If needed, we could pull in our lighting, I could dial in our lighting designer. But as Chris just mentioned, the LLF or the light loss factor, what the way it was described or explained to me is because this tends to be more of a focus on prior lighting technology, particularly when a lot of site lights were done with metal halide in the case here. So we have a lot less of light loss due to light degradation or aging of the luminaire, or for I'll call it dirt degradation as a limiting factor. So with LED lights, they were explaining that the LATF is really a more accurate LATF would be actually the number we really should be looking at, because with the modern LED light, that is the number that we use, because there's a lot less degradation or loss of lighting because of dirt and the aging of the lamp. And then also the ballast is historically factored into the LLF, and the LATF would eliminate that. So if necessary, I could have our lighting designer better explain that at a much more technical level, but I just wanted to point that out. Jumping back to and of course, as Chris mentioned, we did reduce all the foot candles to be less than 30 under the canopy, as well as the balance of the site. Moving on to the building elevations. I apologize, my graphics card seems a little slow with these larger drawing files. What we did is, of course, from our previous, I know you guys have seen these elevations multiple times, but from our initial design, our canopy, or the tower that we refer to here, was initially 25 feet. We're up to 31.5 feet now, so we've raised it quite a bit, as well as the pitch on the roof, to make it a little more prominent feature. On the I'll call it the airport elevation, this lower elevation, we extended the cultured stone around from the rear elevation at the drive-through to give it that more cohesive look, wrapping the corner, as was pointed out on that perspective view. And I also saw there were some comments about the tower not being as prominent. I wanted to make sure it was clear with these, and it's a little hard at this scale with the tower view of the tower in the plan view. So I did a little blow up here to kind of illustrate this better. The tower, we took it from being in the same plane as the adjacent wall to bumping it out 18 inches to give more of that three-dimensional depth and make the tower more prominent. So that would help. And then, of course, as Chris mentioned, we also dropped the windows down to the wainscot across the front elevation. And we wrapped, jump to the next elevation, we wrapped the front elevation around the right side with the stone there as well, and which would be shown in this elevation. There was just pointing out some of the other items. We have 2 ice machines shown. We normally have 2 on that front elevation. We moved 1 around to the right side. These are the propane lockers. Again, this is on the right side that really just faces the drive-through. Beyond that, it's a slope or a grade up. And then beyond that is the VDOT stormwater pond. So these won't be really visible by mostly just our drive-through vendor customers will see those. Going back, also want to apologize for jumping back and forth. I probably should have combined these 2 drawings onto one, but a couple other things I wanted to point out on that elevation that after looking at the staff report was also on the front elevation, we have some decorative fencing. I'll let it catch up. To kind of give a division, because we don't put a curb in, so we like to give a visual delineation between the sidewalk and the parking spaces. We have some bollard lights. This item here in this, I'll call it this left of center, we have a display. It's for windshield washing fluid, and it's roughly about 3 feet high, or equal to the height of the wainscot. And we did leave one ice machine here, more, and it's, when I say an ice machine, it's really just a freezer to hold the ice for customers to pick up. We thought, we'd really like you to consider what we could do to keep at least one of them on the front elevation, because this is important. It's actually one of our most popular scan and go items, because the convenience to the customer to not have to walk around the side of the building and carry a couple bags of ice out to their car. We would be open to maybe some other colors to make it a little softer or blend into the view here. Again, this is behind the canopy, which is behind a lot of landscaping, so we don't think it's going to be that prominent from the street view. So what else? Oh, and again, just to reiterate, normally we would have a roof screen over to hide the rooftop equipment. We've extended the parapet several feet to avoid the need of a roof screen. So all the rooftop equipment is screened. And if you have a closer view, you can see the outline of that equipment on the roof. So it's well screened. And due to the grades, they will be even further enhanced by the difference in elevations. For the canopy, this is, we did lower our canopy down to the 14-foot 6-inch maximum clearance under the canopy. I think it might be something of an interpretation of the guidelines and requirements for the canopy. Of course, the big change here was making the low side facing the Route 29 entrance corridor. And this was a big change for us. So pretty much flipped it from what was initially proposed. Of course, the last time we came back with it being flat. So this actually takes that lighting in the underside of the canopy and actually tilts it even further away from the corridor. Zooming in here, we do understand the 14-foot 6 inches, which we have for clearance to the bottom of the truss. My take on that, the fascia is limited to 36 inches height, which we're at 1 foot 10 inches for our fascia. It's by design or the nature of the open truss that this elevation from the top of the canopy to the bottom of the truss is going to be just over 3.5 feet versus the 36 inches. So just like to point that out, and hopefully we can get some clarification with our discussion to follow. So for the car wash, no significant changes. We did add the signage in detail. Most of these are actually mounted on the building, would be facing the opposite direction of the corridor as the customer approaches the entrance to the car wash. And just to reiterate a few earlier review comments, not this time, but this elevation is provided a lot of landscaping to really screen and minimize the impact of the view from the car wash from Airport Road. For these site elements, as I pointed those out on the drawing, of course, we're limiting the colors here to the black background, 2 colors, the dark bronze uprights. The car wash machine, this is just facing the person as prior to them entering the wash. There was comment about vending machines. We don't really have any things offered through a vending machine on the exterior views. And then we have our air machine, which we have free air for customers as well as a vacuum. And I think all the drive-through elements, of course, have been changed. We had initially proposed these to be red and with multiple colors on the signs, but everything will be dark bronze, so it'll be very discreet. Really only noticeable, primarily it's for the drive-through customer. And of course, we have the drive-through details. Oh, and I apologize. I want to go back to one more thing I failed to point out when we were looking at the building. When you're looking at the southern elevation, which faces Airport Road, just a little more clarification on this view. Apologize. On this lower elevation, which faces Airport Road, if we zoom in closer, it's and this is probably in part by design, the left dark bronze rectangle, that is a service door. And then it's by design that it's dark bronze. It's not meant to draw attention. It's just for service. Particularly if like somebody had to come out to a drive-through customer or something. The other item is right next to that. That is a dark bronze cabinet that conceals our cooking oil, which we have what's called bulk oil, and this is used in the cooking for the fryers. And this is where that oil is stored in a small cabinet here. So I wanted to point that out. I think there was some comments and that might not have been real clear looking at the drawings. And we looked at other locations for that, but because of the location of the fryer and the store, we're limited to the distance that can be from the source. So just looking at the floor plan real quick. That cabinet is here on the side, and of course this across the top is the back drive-through elevation, and the fryers are right here above the word kitchen. So that is why the distance there. I went through that very quickly. So would anybody else on the Sheets team, Jamie, any thoughts? I tried to keep that very brief and limited to just the most recent comments.
I think that was good, Lee. Good update. I think we do have some comments on the staff recommendations, but otherwise, that's an accurate picture of the changes we made since the last time you've seen the plans.
Would anybody like me to dial in the lighting designer for a better explanation of the LLF versus LATF?
Guess I'll ask my fellow board members, anybody need additional information on that?
I don't. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
No, I don't care either.
Great. Well, any further presentation before we move to questions?
We would be happy to address your question.
Okay, great. Fred, you want to start off?
Sure. I don't know, Lee, if you addressed this in your comments, but if you did, forgive me, I missed it. But it's related to one of the staff comments, and it's specific to the cabinet style signs. Did you have any thoughts or comments on that?
Yes. So to be honest with you, our focus was knowing that there was a separate ARB review and approval of the signs. We didn't include a lot of details for the signage. Like, for example, we did include the monument sign,
Right.
which Chris mentioned, which this would be a cabinet style sign because these fuel prices are controlled not actually at the store. Somebody doesn't go out there and change the numbers every day. It's done electronically, remotely. So that by the mechanics of that display, and
Right.
that would still be a cabinet sign. We understand that it would have to be at nighttime. All this red area you see would be opaque, and you'd really just see the white letters for the fuel
Right.
price. And so for that, now back to the building, we're certainly able to do a when we say cabinet style, I always think of that to mean it's a cabinet built to hold internal light, the lighting and the wiring for that sign. Yeah, we can certainly do surface mounted signs that are lit by either a light bar or a gooseneck or something to that effect, and avoid the cabinet type sign on the building.
Okay, great. Great, thank you. And then the only other thing was the view of the west elevation from Airport Road, which I know is one of the concerns of staff. It just dawns on me, I guess, that the car wash is actually probably going to be blocking some of that view. And I don't know if this is really a question or not, but when you pull up your perspective views from Airport Road looking back, it seems to me that the angle is pretty oblique. In other words, you're looking at in a way that would give you the probably longest exposure of the west elevation. And I'm just trying to get my head around how much of that elevation is going to be blocked by the car wash. Without pulling up the architectural plans, can you remind me how far away the car wash is from the edge of that building? The main building?
Oh, the separation here between, like where
Yeah.
the drive-through is?
Yeah,
Uh, let me
just
do the-
ballpark. Is it?
It's, I hate to quote a number without
Yeah.
taking a quick peek here. I can give you a quick estimate.
Thank you.
We got 20. It's going to be almost 30 feet. Let me double check.
Okay, so that image just answered two questions for me. It's actually extending, it's proud of the southern entrance, or the southern facade, right? I'm not doing a good job of mentioning it, but this right here, I don't know if you can see that on my drawing, but this area in front of the front southern facade of the car wash is proud of the southern facade of the main building. Correct?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's all I needed. That's just a clarification.
Yeah, if I understood, this view probably describes it best. Right there.
Okay.
And that's the view
Thank you.
without the trees. Of course, we have
Right.
the
Right.
landscape version of it too.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Fred. Frank Stoner, any questions?
Lee, just one question about the stone wrap at the drive-through there and how that terminates into the brick. I don't think there's any offset. Is that correct?
That's correct. This stone on this elevation, it just wraps, and then there's a transition back to the brick, the main core material for the building.
And then one other question, just as to sign orientation, again, you guys are going to submit a separate application, but it looks like the current sign is designed to align maybe with the outside of the window. It's not centered in the tower itself, and it's not centered on the window.
We can certainly center that. We'll correct that detail and make sure it's centered. I think it would look better centered.
That's all I had in the way of questions. Thank you.
Hey, Lee, this is Tom. Can you bring up that floor plan with the fryer grease tank you had up there before? That might answer his question a little bit with regard to the stone.
Oh, yes. Okay. Zoom out a little bit.
Yeah. We have a bump out. You could see the bump out by the fryer grease tank a little bit there to help terminate that stone.
Yeah, it's right here.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
And there's a bump out down at the main vestibule. You see that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's 18 inches.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the bump out on the northeast corner there? Because there's a stone element there as well.
We usually go about four more inches out because that's the reason when we have a drive-through store, it adds 7 square feet to the base, and the 7 square feet is the thickness of the stone that bumps out from the brick.
I see.
And this one, the square footage, of course, will be larger because we have the bump out of the tower, which is not normal for our other stores. So our square footage will grow just a little bit more than normal due to the bump outs, the additional bump out.
That's great. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Frank. Frank Hancock.
Yes, thank you, Lee. One question about the window glass. Looking at the east elevation, it's rendered differently at I guess the door that's at the northeast corner versus the rest of the windows are kind of rendered almost bronze. Just if you could explain the difference there.
I mean, the shading of the glass,
Yes.
I think, well, you got a sharp eye. I don't notice that much. That wasn't the intent. The intent was for it to be the same.
Yeah, the glazing are all the same.
Oh, I see. Okay, yes. Yeah,
Yeah. You see how this is a little darker, Lee?
yeah, this should be the same color as the others.
Yeah.
Good catch.
And it may be an optical illusion, possibly just because of the brick context versus the stone.
Could be.
Actually, I think the intent was for it to be the same.
So all the glazing, all the windows are the same.
Yes, yes.
And then curious, what other colors does the ice machine come in? Didn't know there are options there.
Well, we would have to come up with some other options, but my thought would be maybe like a tan. I mean, dark bronze, I think, would stand out a little too much, but maybe a more subtle tan color would be better.
And are you able to relocate the display with the wiper fluid or the windshield fluid and the propane?
I mean, of course we could, but we'd like to consider that we have lots of landscaping, parking, drive aisle, then a canopy, then additional parking right up against the building. And these spaces are the ones that are most frequently used. It's going to be a very limited chance of being visible from the street, from Route 29.
Could we
It
put
is
it behind the railing? If we shifted it left, right, and
Yeah.
get it behind one of the two railing sections?
Yeah, we could certainly do that. That would really help obscure it a bit, make it a little more transparent, less transparent.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Yeah, just one more thing on the ice chests. We do wrap them separately. We have a separate vendor that wraps our ice chests. So we can work with them if need be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Well, Lee, thank you for the presentation. I guess my first question really concerns the tower. Appreciate staff's comments to see whether it can be more of a traditional tower form and also whether it can be more prominent. I think not only in height, I know you spoke about height, but also in terms of its position and depth of the facade. Right now, it's behind the cooking oil, the service door, and the takeout bump. And so I don't think the hierarchy is quite working. Have you given any thought to how you could make that tower more prominent and maybe bring it forward?
Maybe in addition to the bump out, we can make it taller, but I mean, with the canopy and some of the other views, I'm not sure.
Just would it be feasible, for example, leaving the vestibule glazing where it is to bring the corners of the tower out to the south, so they were parallel with the south projection or in plane with the south projection of the drive-through area, and then similarly to expand the eastern wall of the tower out, I guess, almost to the edge of the curb. So the glazing in the vestibule would remain there, but fundamentally the tower form would become larger, and it could have a pier that landed at the corner, so it would be a complete form instead of a carved out volume.
Okay, so for that, I would look at the site plan. Your thought was, if this tower,
So effectively, if three of its four corners landed, outside, and at the south they landed so that they were parallel to or slightly proud of the drive-through, and at the east, similarly, I think that, and just speculating out loud, that might allow that form to have a similar width to the takeout bay, so that they'd be similar in elevation that way, but then the tower, by being taller, would clearly have some hierarchy and prominence that I think right now, because it's set further back, it isn't quite getting.
Oh,
I think so. Lee, for example, if you expanded that square back to the
yeah,
apparent corner of the
like there or,
right, in terms of the roof form of the tower, would that be feasible? Because I think
I-
that might start to address the staff comment.
that would be rather large vestibule, and, you know, of course, wow, eliminate the sidewalk around the front of the building, that would be a concern. Because we don't really have room to, you know, make this sidewalk that much larger. Would effectively take out at least one of the tables. We'd be down to maybe two smaller tables for a patio. I think it would be easier to, or maybe a little more practical to raise the tower height rather than, you know, give it such a large footprint. Or if I follow what you mean,
Yeah, or if, for example, the piers of the tower were to come down, or if the tower expanded slightly more so that the sidewalk could go under it. I'm not proposing that you make the vestibule larger, just find a way to
oh,
express the tower form.
instead of,
And in fact, the vestibule could get smaller. And I'm sorry to speculate so explicitly about what might solve it, but I know we've been talking about how the tower form could be more prominent in almost all the reviews. So I was just interested in seeing if there might be a feasible way to address that.
I see what you mean. So almost,
And I understand that that might take some further consideration.
and of course, Tom Columbus is our architect. Do you understand, Tom, what he's saying here?
Yeah, I'm almost sensing that it might be like kind of the sidewalk would be open. And I think what you're getting at is like the glazing stays where it's at, but you kind of walk under the tower to get to the glazing. Is that?
Right. And you wouldn't necessarily need to repeat the canopies that you're proposing right now, because the tower would effectively provide that shelter.
Yeah, they would take the place of the tower expansion would take the place of the canopies.
Right. And then I think coupled with staff's recommendation to make the southwestern bay all stone, I think it would start to create partial symmetry for that facade that would be appropriate, I think, and also allow the tower to have some more prominence.
Or how about this? If to give you a little more balance, if this corner was done in stone, and you know, maybe reduce the glazing area to give it that balance.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you considering it. I think it could be worth considering. I think right now, as staff have noted, you know, that sort of the car wash is closest to Airport Road, then the cooking oil, then the takeout area, and then the tower. So I think to the extent this might allow the tower to come at least parallel to the cooking oil, I think it could address those comments. Let's see. I think that was really the primary issue I was concerned with. Are there any of the, and I appreciated your presentation, Lee, so I don't have anything further at this time. Let's see, well, are there any members of the public wishing to speak, Carolyn?
No, there aren't. Not at this time, no.
Any further items from board members, or is folks ready to go into discussion?
Kate, I got the sense that they had some specific feedback for us or regarding the staff comments. That'd be helpful to hear before we go into discussion.
Okay, certainly. Sorry, I thought that was part of the presentation, but please go ahead.
Thanks. I just want to confirm or maybe get some acknowledgement that the intent of the staff comments #1 has been with us since the first meeting. And it's not like we're trying to not take your feedback. And we are literally taking the board's feedback from meeting 1 to meeting 2 to the workshop to today's meeting. So, when we talk about the tower, we had a lot of positive feedback last time that the tower came from 28 feet now to 31 feet 6 inches. That the MAPES canopy, which was outlined there, that was more hidden, was enlarged to get closer to Airport Road. And so I guess if we're saying it's just not enough with respect to comment 1, I just want to understand, like, we're trying, and we've added stone to add to the tower feature. We've pushed the building back to accommodate we pulled the building closer to airport to, have the sense of tower closer to the road. We also talked about moving the seating, which from the 29 side to the airport side, which while everyone was a good idea, that made the math harder to accomplish now because that sidewalk got bigger, right? So it's intuitive that the seating is on airport, the more sensitive the 2 corridor, the more where the kitchen is, where the outside seating is, where the inside seating is. And so now we're up against that another 2 feet. And that's really what we're talking about here with respect to making sure that the car wash is more proud than the airport side of the building. Does that make sense? We're not trying to the repetitive.
Certainly, no, appreciate that. And my comments are not meant to suggest that you haven't been responsive. I think just feeling like it would be helpful to consider still further another way to resolve that staff comment. I don't know that, at least in my perspective, but that's again why we're going to have a discussion with the board. I don't know that other members feel the same way.
Okay.
I don't know that the corner is there yet to address that.
I got you. Thank you. I got you.
Yep.
And so I don't know when the appropriate time is to go through these 14. There are definitely some that we can fully agree with and sign up for. There's also some that I think either could use a little rewording or 1 or 2 that with today's explanation, we'd like to eliminate, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that would be a great time if there are any that you would like to change or remove to discuss that.
So 1, I think is what we're talking about. That's clear. And if the larger board will take into that consideration, that further discussion. Number 2, I think Lee was going to talk about number 2, and this one we have a question on ourselves. Go ahead, Lee. We provided the glass spec.
Yeah, so I had a lot of conversation with our glazing supplier, and we're running into an issue with meeting some of the energy code requirements that he's trying to work through this. Since this is I refer to this as more of a technical item, it's not going to affect the layout of the site or really for our configuration of the elevations or their real appearance. Is there a way that we could maybe make that a condition of an approval so that we can have the technical part worked out between our glass supplier and the staff for that review? I would ask if that's possible.
Yes, I think that's the intent of this, is if we gave you a certificate of appropriateness with this comment, then
Okay.
you could satisfy this requirement with staff. I'm confident you can find a glazing that'll meet that.
Okay, and then similarly for the standard window glass note, we will make sure that's prominent on all the drawings. And then we'll make sure all these elements of the site are better detailed on all future site plans, and like the vending, well, there are no vending machines, but air pumps and bollards, lights, everything like that. Then back to number 5, we can maybe have a little more discussion on the board's thoughts on the ice machine and being relocated to the right side of the store. If there's any way we might be able to have a compromise with something that would be palatable for the board for the one of the vending ice machines, rather, to remain on the front of the front elevation.
Well, it sounds like you've outlined the possibility of the color. So I think we can discuss that with the board and there may, I can't project, but folks may be open to that.
Okay, and of course, for number 6, we'll certainly make sure that mechanical equipment note. If it's different than the one we showed, we'll make sure we get the most current one on all those drawings and on the site plan as well. Number 7 looks just more of like a guidance comment. We'll certainly make sure we add the tree protection on the grading and sediment erosion control drawings. And number 8 for the canopy and the 6 inches. I went through it pretty quick. Was it clear what the way we were trying? I think we were trying to make the standard guideline fit our probably more unique canopy, where it looks like that was intended to be more for the typical flat gas canopy and limit the fascia size to 36 inches. Is there any flexibility with, or would you like me to pull up that drawing again just to take a quick look at it?
Last time we discussed the rigid may be the wrong word, but the black and white ordinance says 14.6, fascia is 36 inches. That's what the ordinance says, or the design guidelines say. You add the two together, you get 17.6, where we're adding the truss element. We're adding, quite frankly, a fascia that is 2/3 less than the maximum fascia. We're adding the sloped canopy. So I'm not sure the 17.6 absolute number is really what we're wanting to be measured up against. And I think last time, once we said, hey, yeah, maybe our flat canopy is not what we want to see, the pitch adds some height. So whereas the absolute top of the canopy now is 21 feet, 5 16 inches. So 8, we'd kind of like see struck if we like this design of canopy.
Okay, noted.
And then I think 9, perhaps it's just clarifying that we would like to use the LATF, which is more applicable for our type of lights than the LLF. And otherwise 9 is on board. 10 makes sense to us. 11, I think we were going to look at we want to make sure that that if we solve eliminating the utility conflict, there's actually a place for those additional trees that we added from last time to go.
Which we do have room. There's room up there to move that tree and really clear that pipe.
Okay.
There's plenty of room.
And then 12, we understand, is a part of template comments. And then 13, we just like to see something more along the lines of all cabinet style signs must have opaque backgrounds, because I think the design guidelines do allow for cabinet signs, and whether they have opaque backgrounds or whether they be externally illuminated. And it seems the first sentence of 13 seems, we wouldn't want to go and say, yes, we understand signs are approved at a different board meeting with different applications, and then have to see this absolute first sentence to 13 saying eliminate. And then 14, we understand that what that means, and 14 something that we can certainly do.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I know we're maybe verging a little bit on a work session. I appreciate you highlighting those concerns. I guess, Margaret and Chris, may I ask you one question? And do other members have any other questions related to that before we go into discussion?
I guess I had one question as relates to the canopy height. And I guess the practical implications for sheets of dropping at 6 inches. So you'd be dropping the 14.6, I guess, to 14.
Yeah.
Is that correct? And is that just a clearance concern?
Well, yeah, I think it's how we're trying to make the guidelines adapt to our design. Whether this is 14.6 or 10.6, this dimension's still going to be more than 36 inches. And so the actual fascia is just under 2 feet at 1 foot 10 inches. This truss design, I mean, we can't just simply take that away. It's actually structurally part of the design. So this is where I think why this guideline doesn't fit this type of design. See this dimension, we go from 18 feet, just over a hair over 18 feet to 14.6. So that's what, 33 feet 6 and 7/16 inches. So we're talking 6 feet and 6 and 7/16 inches versus 30. Is the difference here.
Yeah, I guess my reading of staff comment was they just wanted to see the total height come down 6 inches. Really less about the fascia consideration. So I'm just trying to understand if that's possible or if the reasons why that's not possible. It'd be helpful to know before we start discussing.
I don't think we have a canopy that is less than 14.6 inches for clearance
Right.
purposes.
The-
And I think that's,
Not meant to reduce it to 14 feet. The comment was meant to say, leave it at 14.6 at the bottom, reduce the maximum top height down to 17.6.
That really has to, then that 6 inches has to come out of the truss.
As a practical matter, are these trusses only located over islands, and are their extents protected by bollards so that they are not actually in a traffic flow area?
They are over columns and bollards, but it's with trucks and especially delivery trucks and things on site, these bollards would have to be we don't want to put truck bollards here. They get very big and they're kind of ugly. So it's a truck bollard thing that we'd have to put. Well, these are nice. These are kind of they're stainless steel bollards, so they very nice, clean, finished look to them, which are, I believe, 3 or 3.5 inches in diameter. And the truck bollard's usually going to be a big steel pipe at 6 inches filled with concrete, much taller, much bigger. We just think aesthetically that would not look good.
So is the concern about traffic driving perpendicular to the canopy truss that you might hit it?
Not so much, I would say the normal flow be going directly between the columns and the trusses. It's when they make that corner, when you pull out of the fueling space and you turn left or right, or like I said, again, the trucks wrapping around the site. And again, a large vehicle or even a fuel truck, delivery truck, any truck coming in, they could run over these bollards and hit that truss. It's kind of I believe it's even a VDOT standard that 14 feet 6 inches is the minimum you should ever have for clearance. So we always try to hold that.
And sometimes since I've calculated a truss, but are those outermost portions with the right angles even carrying any load?
I really am not comfortable speaking about the structural design of them. I can always get that answer.
But just saying, if they're not and they were deleted, I think that then the only portions of the truss at that height would be over the fuel pumps. Okay. Any other questions? I think in terms of LATF versus LFF, Margaret or Chris, do either of you understand that issue enough?
We have not used LATF. I think what would be best at this point in time is to leave the comment as it is. We're happy to work with the applicant afterwards to see if using that will meet ordinance requirements, but I don't think it's something we can resolve right here.
Great. No, thank you. I think that sounds like a reasonable approach. I guess then if there are no further questions, why don't we move to discussion? Frank Stoner, will you kick us off?
Sure. I would say, as I've thought about particularly the tower issue, Dave, and I'll start there. I don't have strong feelings one way or the other. I probably appreciate kind of your thoughts about how you could increase the size and make the scale feel more appropriate. One of the problems for me, quite frankly, are the other stone elements, which I think exacerbate the tower problem. And I don't think, I appreciate that the applicant wrapped the stone around the drive-through there, but because it doesn't extend over to the edge of that mass or the next corner, it still feels quite awkward, in my opinion. And I'm wondering whether it wouldn't make sense actually to just eliminate the stone element entirely in the drive-through on both those. I think the brick's attractive. I think the stone base stays, and it just kind of declutters the building and perhaps, and then makes the tower feel a little bit more significant because it's really the sole stone element that's, kind of drawing attention to that corner of the building. Just a thought. You're the architect, so I would ultimately defer to your judgment. But I could probably live with the existing tower with those changes. I think the stone on the northeast corner works certainly better than the two on the drive-through. So maybe you keep that as a way to provide some balance. I could probably, I don't have strong feelings about the canopy height. I think that's just it's kind of a standard we've operated to. I understand their point with regard to the size of the fascia and the truss not really being part of that assembly, or shouldn't be part of that assembly. Sounds like there is some logic to 14.6 being the minimum clearance for purposes of delivery trucks, et cetera, even though I don't know that they're likely to hit the truss, but I mean, these guys understand the realities of their operation certainly better than I do. So those are kind of my, I don't have a lot of heartburn over the ice machine and the other stuff. I think if it can be colored, perhaps a little bit more compatibly with the building, that would be great. But I think the point that that was made is a good one, and that is you got parking in front of all those spaces. It's most of the time you're not even going to be able to see that stuff. And I think that's about the extent of my comments.
Thank you, Frank. Frank Hancock.
Thank you. I think Frank Sutter makes a nice point about maybe there's a way to do it with a material change. The other thought I had as we were looking at it is maybe that kitchen bump out is what's causing the problem. So I don't know if there's anything you can do floor plan wise. And then that takes one of the three elements out and maybe gives a little bit more prominence to the tower. I agree. I think the canopy is nice as it's designed, and I'm not, I don't need need it to come down 6 inches. I think architecturally it looks nice. It's definitely a concession and different from kind of the prototype that I think we saw at the beginning. So other than that, I think the site plan looks good. I don't have any issues with the site plan other than the few little comments that I think everybody agrees are pretty minor. if possible, to move some of the display items, the ice, the wiper fluid that behind the fence. I think that's an improvement. I think you do make a great point with the landscaping, that kind of multi-layered canopy, parked cars. I don't know how visible it'll be. I think the applicant's visualizations are really strong, that once you layer all that landscaping in and kind of looking at the grade of the site, you know, a lot of these things are going to be obscured. That's really all I have.
Thank you, Frank. Fred?
Thanks, Dade. So I'm going to start with the easy stuff and then go to the more challenging stuff. Easy stuff is in terms of the ice machine along the front facade. I agree with Frank. I don't think it's really going to be that visible. I think if there's an easy way to change the color and make it more consistent with what's on the building, whether it's a tan or a bronze, that's fine. I think that could be helpful, but I do agree it's probably not going to be that prominent or visible. In terms of the, you know, the wrapping of the stone around the backside, the western elevation, it's always just felt a little awkward to me to have just two stone piers that mark the drive-through windows. But if you think about it, if you look to the, I guess, well, I'm looking at the Faces West Auto Center elevation. If you look to the left of those two stone piers, really everything is going to be covered visually, for the most part, by the car wash. Everything moving sort of to the north on the western facade. So I'm not sure, to be honest, how much of a problem that is, that those two stone piers are there. And I may be a man on an island here, but I'm willing to say that I think the tower in elevation from the entrance corridor looking back is prominent enough. I feel like, you know, it is in the front. It is on the front entrance. It's at the corner. It's a lighter stone material. It has a roof. It has a sign, and it has more glazing. All of those things to me make it feel like a more substantial structure. I will also defer to Dade. No pressure here, Dade. But you know, if it needs to go up a little bit or if it needs to expand a little bit, fine. Otherwise, to be honest, I feel like it's prominent enough, and I would feel that I would know where I was going as sort of a wayfinding element. Agree that the sign should be centered for sure. In terms of the canopy on the front, if I'm understanding correctly, the guidelines on the fascia that come across, that height is meant to reduce the flat vertical element that's viewed from the entrance corridor. So you don't have this really wide band that runs parallel with the entrance corridor that, you know, looks kind of like a big rectangle in the air. What's happening here, if I'm interpreting it correctly, is you're seeing the butt end of the trusses from the entrance corridor. So really, it's a much narrower fascia. It's that 1'10" that you were saying, I think, Lee, is really what you're going to be seeing. The rest of that elevation, which is made up of the truss, is only at the islands. So you don't get that feeling of massing that I think was the reason the entrance guideline, the corridor guidelines were reducing or I would say, you know, standardizing the maximum elevation of that canopy. So those were my comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Fred. And thank you for grouping things from easy to hard. I think appreciate that structure. I think, like others, I think the ice machine can be solved with paint. So I appreciate the knowledge that that's a separate cladding package and can be done in a color that will minimize its visibility. Appreciate Frank Hancock's suggestion of keeping the display behind the fence as a way to sort of minimize that. I think feeling a little bit of the heat on the tower. I do appreciate that the applicant has been working to increase its prominence. I feel that it still could be better resolved by being expanded and brought in plane forward somewhat. I think I struggled a bit with the organization of the building and the way the drive-through service area sticks into the front of the building. And so I think if the applicant could consider expanding the tower form perhaps along the lines that we discussed today. I think that would be a dramatic improvement in the massing of the building. In association with that, I think I appreciate other members suggesting that there may be a way to accomplish some better unity in the western portion of the south facade without going to stone. Open to that as a consideration. I think that still some more attention to it to resolve that element would be appreciated, whether it's in stone or in brick. Let's see. And I think Fred, appreciate your logic around the canopy. I do think that it's appreciated that it's a more slender edge. Certainly, if in developing the structure of the trusses, there's a way to pull them down 6 inches, that would be preferable, so that we can stick to that guideline, which we've been typically very uniform in pursuing. But I think that the current design is acceptable. Thinking about some of the comments, I think in terms of LATF versus LFF, I appreciate Margaret's suggestion. So I think I would recommend we leave the comment as it is. The applicant can follow up with information for staff. We can reevaluate whether that's the right criteria. In terms of cabinet signs, I think if the applicant's suggestion that they're permitted is accurate, which I think it may be, then I think the opaque backgrounds would be satisfactory to me. Those were the issues that I was aware of.
Nate, if I could make one clarification regarding.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Margaret.
I think the point about the cabinet signs is that staff would not typically approve a cabinet sign on a wall. So not a wall mounted sign. We do typically approve cabinet signs as parts of freestanding signs.
Thank you.
Distinction didn't make it into the comments. Sorry for that confusion.
Oh, no. I appreciate you restating that clarification. And are there any precedents of wall-mounted cabinet signs?
There are certainly some out there. Certainly ones are used for as graphics in connection with channel letters. A further distinction maybe we should have made is that we would also not recommend approval of letters on a panel attached to the wall. The guidelines point out that the channel letter signs are preferred for wall signs because it allows the building to be the primary feature. You can read the wall through the letters, and so that's why one of the reasons cabinet signs aren't the preferred method, and also letters attached to a panel attached to a wall are not the preferred type.
Thank you. Great. Well, shall we review the recommendations?
Let me share my screen. I'll try to pull that up so we can. We're going to need whoever's sharing their screen right now to stop.
Stop sharing.
You're not seeing it, right?
Yeah, we see it.
Do you? Hold on. I'm not. Hold on. Trying. Are you able to see it now?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Well, yeah. We want to tackle number 1 first.
Sure. And so by all means, Frank and Fred, let me know if there's something else you would suggest. I would propose that we add something there that says increase the size of the tower form so that its south face is parallel to the south projection of the takeout bay.
How do you envision that from a structural perspective? are you envisioning stone walls coming or stone columns coming down at the corner and then just kind of an opening?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, if it were the stone cladding at 3 corners projected out there coming down to the ground with, I think as Lee or perhaps it was Tom was indicating, with the possibility of passage under that between the building and that pier.
Dave, I'm usually not one to disagree with you at all. I highly respect your design sense, but I'm wondering if this hedges a little bit close to us defining the design, and whether we should simply, if you all agree, we should simply leave it to an understanding that prominence and hierarchy is the issue, and that they need to come back to us with options during a work session that address those 2 key elements. The reason I say that is because if I understood what was shown, increasing the size of the tower so the south face is parallel to the south projection, it may have additional implications on the site plan that we're not aware of. And I feel more comfortable leaving it to the applicant to balance everything that they have to balance, to come back with what they feel is the best solution to the issue of hierarchy and prominence.
Thank you, Fred. I think you said it very well, and I agree. I think that's a very reasonable approach. So any other revisions to these from the discussion today? Any thoughts about number 8?
I'm in favor of striking number 8.
Me too.
Okay, agreed.
I think number 5, do we want to add the potential to paint?
Yes.
So relocate or paint the ice machine or something.
Yep, I think that's a good call.
Yeah, there you go.
Uh,
Are we suggesting they need to repaint the ice machine and the store equipment, or?
No, I think relocating the store equipment behind the fence is appropriate.
Great. Any comments on the cabinet signs?
I would just make the clarification that Margaret highlighted, which is cabinet signs are acceptable as freestanding signs, right? If I heard that correctly, just to not confuse the applicant.
But are they also acceptable as wall signs, even if they are either opaque or externally illuminated?
We would only approve a cabinet style sign for a wall sign when it is a secondary sign, which would typically be a small graphic or logo box associated with channel letters.
How large are the cabinet signs as shown on the current site plan?
I'm going to ask Chris to answer that question.
The building mounted is just under 3 by just over 9. And the canopy mounted, it's shown is 1 foot 8 inch by 9 foot 2. or so.
And Chris, can you tell how large the actual letters are in the current rendering of the wall sign?
No.
But any other revisions?
May we ask one question, if I may?
Certainly, yes.
Thank you. We did look at the design guidelines for wall signs and cabinets, and I think part of our confusion is the fact that by my read of the guidelines, it does certainly emphasize that channel lettering is preferred, but it doesn't say that cabinet signs are not permitted ever. That there's certainly some design preferences and so forth stated. I think that's part of what our heartburn is, that they reviewed those in advance and are a little surprised to hear now that they're not ever allowed when the guidelines indicate a mere preference.
Thank you for highlighting that.
Can we look at that elevation again? That includes wall signage.
I'm going to stop sharing. Chris, can you pull that up?
Say that again. Pull up.
The elevation that shows the wall
Shows
sign.
the wall signage. Sorry, having technical difficulties over here.
I'll see if I can pull it up.
Yeah.
Can you see that elevation?
Yep. I guess part of my question is if we allowed them channel letters, what are the acceptable background options? Would they mount the channel letters onto a red panel that's not illuminated? How would,
Well,
without the red panel, I'm not sure it even registers as a logo.
the sign would be a channel letter sign, which is what would be the standard type that's proposed and approved.
Just mounted to the stone itself.
Right.
So they could not put a red panel behind the channel letters.
That is not what we typically approve. We are bringing this to your attention today because we realize it's what the applicant wants, and it's not what we would typically approve. So if you have an alternate direction for us, we just need to know that.
Okay.
Would externally lighting the plans be helpful for the sign, or at least to keep that as an option for when the sign permit and sign meeting comes in down the road?
External illumination is always an option. It doesn't get past the issue of the the preference for the channel letters to be attached directly to the wall.
So then as a potential path forward today, I think we could revise the comments so that we just note as long as pointed out that the guidelines prefer channel letters, and then review this more fully in the sign submission. I think this issue may also relate somewhat to the discussion we'll have a little later about
Right.
the sign for Aldi. So I don't know that we'll reach a conclusion here, but we can
Shall I
at least,
pull-
yes, yeah, why don't you pull the comments back up and we can at least.
There's no disagreement over the cabinet signs for the canopy itself. Is that correct?
It would be the same problem in that. Can you see the comments?
Yes, I can see them, Margaret. Yeah, thank you, Margaret. I think that's consistent with our guidelines and preferences. I appreciate you highlighting this issue for us. I feel like it maybe deserves some discussion just on its own. Any further comments before we consider this motion? And remind me, Margaret, this is a motion for is it a certificate of appropriateness subject to basically confirming the final
Right.
design resolution?
It's for a certificate of appropriateness subject to the amended conditions and a work session on comment number 1.
Okay, thank you. Any further revisions from board members before? And is anybody ready to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll move for approval of the certificate of appropriateness for ARB 2020-108 Airport Road Sheets Final Plan with the conditions listed in the staff report amended as follows. Number 1, add the language, address prominence and hierarchy in the tower form. Strike the last sentence. Let me see here. Item 5, just read the whole thing. Relocate or revise the color of the ice machine and relocate the store equipment behind the fence. Strike the end. Strike item number 8. Revise item number 13 to read, the preferred wall sign is channel letters. Cabinet style signs may be used for freestanding signs. All cabinet type signs must have opaque backgrounds.
Can I just clarify that in number 1, the last sentence that was struck was something that was added during the meeting?
So it could potentially just be deleted from the motion.
I'll second.
Can I ask a question before we vote?
Yes.
I'm a little bit unclear about what we're saying in item 13. We're saying the preferred sign type is channel letters. Does that give them the flexibility to ignore that advice at this point? It's not a...
That's my understanding, Frank.
Yeah. Okay.
We're just reaffirming the preference and the tradition of signs here.
Okay.
Okay, Carolyn, could you call the vote?
Sure. Mr. Stoner,
Aye.
Mr. Hancock,
Aye.
Mr. Vanderwerf,
Aye.
Mr. Missile.
Aye.
Great. Well, thank you very much to the applicant and my fellow board members. I think the proposal's very close and appreciate everybody's full consideration this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all. Have a good day.
Great. Well, we'll move on to the next item, ARB 2020-106 and 116 ABC Initial Site Plan and Preliminary Architectural Review. Margaret, may we have your presentation?
Or are you able to see my slides? Great. Just want to point out that on the staff report, I had the wrong application numbers. So the ones that are listed here in the slide are accurate. And I'm trying to make one more adjustment so I can see. Just a second. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is a proposal to establish a mixed-use development over multiple parcels of land on 5th Street Extended at Old Lynchburg Road. A portion of the development is located directly opposite the county office building on 5th Street, and the rest of the development is on the other side of Old Lynchburg Road between Country Green Road and Mountainwood Road. Today's review is focused on the initial site plan for the overall development and the architectural design of the storage building. The ARB has not previously reviewed any proposals for this site, but a rezoning was approved for the property in October of this year. The portion of the development that fronts onto the 5th Street entrance corridor, which is in the lower right-hand corner of this slide, includes retail buildings, an office building, a hotel, and the storage building. And the portion of the development that's in the north and west of Old Lynchburg Road, it's the lower left corner of this slide, is composed primarily of 3- and 4-story apartment buildings. In the portion of the development that fronts the entrance corridor, all the proposed buildings would be visible from the street. The buildings are oriented parallel to the street. There is some parking that does front on the street, but overall the building locations help break up all that parking area. The part of the development west of Old Lynchburg Road will have less visibility from the entrance corridor because it's further away and because there's intervening development, but there are views available through the parcels that do front the entrance corridor street, so the upper parts of the apartment buildings are expected to be visible. The applicant intends to develop the block with the storage building first. The plan is to clear and grade the entire site at the time the storage block is developed. The landscaping associated with the storage block would be completed with the construction of the storage building, but entrance corridor frontage landscaping would not be installed until the blocks fronting 5th Street are developed. The applicant has provided these images to illustrate the storage building after its construction is complete and before other parts of the development are completed. The images are from the intersection of 5th Street Extended with Old Lynchburg Road at the top and Wahoo Way at the bottom. Our review of the site plan revealed some inconsistencies with the guidelines in terms of landscaping, but those inconsistencies can be resolved with the final site plan submittal, and we identified no issues to prevent recommendation of approval of the initial site plan. Our review did identify some potential issues with the architectural design. Blankness would typically be an issue for this type of building, which doesn't usually incorporate a lot of windows, but blankness isn't really an issue here because there's so much going on in the elevations. There are storefront elements at the ends of the south elevation, that's the one facing entrance corridor street. Between the storefronts, there's a brick base along the middle. There's a couple of vertical CMU panels. There's ephes that's scored into panels of varying widths and colors. And on the side elevations, there's a different brick base. Again, blankness isn't an issue because there's so much going on in the elevations, but the guidelines call for compatibility and unity and compatibility with historic architecture. Most of our local historic architecture uses some organizing principle to establish the arrangement of building elements. So we're recommending here that the elevations be further refined to achieve a greater sense of organization and unity. A second issue identified with the storage building is that the windows in the storage areas are proposed with a vinyl film covering, to block the view into the storage units. In this image, the windows circled in red are the ones that would have the applied vinyl. The applicant offers as an alternative using ephes panels in a contrasting color instead of the windows. More ephes isn't really an improvement. Clear glass without the vinyl film is what's appropriate for the entrance quarter. So our recommendation is to recommend approval of the initial site plan, and we've listed in the staff report comments on both site and architecture to be addressed for the final site plan. I'm happy to try to answer any questions you have. I'll leave this. I won't unshare for the moment in case there's something that you'd like me to go back to.
Great, thank you, Margaret. Fred, do you have any questions for Margaret?
I'm sorry, Dave, did you say me, Fred?
Oh, yes, yeah. Any
Okay.
questions? Yes, yeah.
Fred and Frank, and there's two Franks, is a little confusing. I guess my only question is the removal of the film coating on the windows. Do we know what will be behind it and visible if they remove that? Are they hallways, or do we have any idea?
I think you would be looking into the storage units, but the applicant will be able to give us more detail on.
Got it. That's it. That's all. Thanks, Dave.
Great, thank you, Fred. Frank Hancock.
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Margaret.
Frank Stoner.
I don't have any questions either. Thanks.
Great, I don't have questions either. So we'll turn to the applicant for their presentation now.
I'm trying to stop sharing. Just move my cursor just a second.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Gretchen Elton. I'm the architect for this project, this portion of the project anyway. So one thing that I do want to go over really fast is what the other buildings look like is part of this complex, because obviously we are presenting this one project at this point, but there are several other buildings that are related. And they are intended to be designed so that they resemble each other. And that's how we sort of worked out the elevations for the storage building. So I just want to go backwards, I think. So no, don't want that. Yeah. Let's just do this. So if we can, you can all see my screen, correct? Okay. So our building is here, and we will have two smaller retail buildings that will partially block our building from the view, at least directly on 5th Street. We do have a pretty sizable office building that would go here, and then a future hotel as well. And I will go backwards. So here's our view from internal on the site, looking at our building. And if we go across the street, we have an office building that also has some glass corners. So that's where that glass corner inspiration came from. It relates directly across to the nearest building. Those glass corners would face each other. And as you can also see, we are using light colors of brick and ephes and even CMU, which is also reflected in that office facade that would be, again, kind of diagonal. This is the corner that would face, I believe, directly across 5th Street to, I believe, your county offices. And if we go a little bit further down, we have the retail facades. This is also, I believe, the 5th Street facade that you can see. We have a light colored something and a darker colored something else, probably CMU, maybe brick, I'm not sure. We haven't obviously gotten that far, but this is our facility here in the back. And as you can see, we will have a significant amount of plantings along 5th Street here. And those retail buildings do kind of block that view a little bit. So if we go back to this facade and our facility specifically, one major comment was the vinyl film that's applied to the glass. Now, we do understand that that is not typical and that that's not preferred. However, this is a storage facility where folks are maybe not careful with the way that they're loading their storage units. What's behind here would be either a metal or a plywood panel that would prevent somebody from shoving a piece of furniture through that glass and out the window. So that's why our alternative is to provide solid wall construction with just an EIFS panel that would still break up the overall facade, but would also, protect the contents of the building from any damage from customers. The other comment that I do recall here is I believe it's related to the corner that is intentionally asymmetrical. We designed sort of using a more modern approach to glass and facade design. And that's why this corner is a bit more glassy and a bit more modern in its appearance. Again, this is the corner that is diagonal from the new office building that would also have that large glass corner in it. This facade, most of this is storage above. So we would have solid storage units, and I can go quick to the floor plan. Above that, we do have that solid storage construction. So again, we would want something behind that glass to protect from anyone potentially damaging the glass and the facade. So that's really how we got to this point here. We wanted, the client really liked the more modern design of the open glass corner. And so, where we can provide that, where it would be all vision glass at this corner, we tried to maximize that. And then where we can't have vision glass, we tried to minimize it as best we could. The materials that we've shown on the board, I realize we don't have physical samples because we aren't in person today, but we did put at least images on here of what we were thinking of, black and white brick. So black brick, white brick, 2 shades of CMU. We have a lighter at the corners and then a darker in the back. And again, this is to protect the facade, not only just to break up the facade aesthetically, but also to protect it from vehicle travel and from damage from people moving large boxes and items and things. A comment related to the mechanical units, and I can say that we are working on this drawings now to further develop and make sure that we get all of the rooftop units back far enough. My understanding is these are residential sized condensing units that are typically about 3 feet in height, which is why our lowest parapet here in the center is 3 feet in height. We are again working on the roof plan to locate those units, and we will verify that they will be screened accordingly by a parapet wall in all locations. I think that's the majority of at least the comments that were provided to us from staff. So I think if you have some questions for me. or
Great,
comments.
thank you. Let's see, Frank Hancock, any questions?
No, thank you for your presentation. It's very helpful to get the context. Hadn't seen any of the images of the other buildings, and to think about this as an assemblage, I think is really important. So thank you.
Frank Stoner, any from you?
Oh. I don't have any questions.
Fred?
Only question when you, I agree, thank you. It's very helpful for the context. When you look at those buildings, I couldn't tell on the site plan whether they had finished floor elevation estimates. But generally speaking, how do they sit relative to each other? It looked like initially from the site plan that this building was lower, but this makes it look higher.
It is lower, so it's a little bit of a challenge, but I will give it I'll give a try. So this is the path, as it were, through the
Yeah.
site. This, I
Yeah.
believe, is 5th Street.
Okay,
So 5th Street is higher, the site falls away, and
Got it.
so we're left with this 3-story corner on our storage facility. And then the site rises back up, and we have a 2-story corner here at the what would be the retail space that would be a tenant retail space.
yeah, I think that's helpful. I think one of the things that'll be helpful to support your application is to have a couple of simple sections that illustrate how this is relative to the entrance corridor.
Okay.
Because my sense is it's 2 or 3 stories lower than
Yes.
5th Street. So I think that will be helpful. Other than that, no questions. Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Fred. Likewise, thank you for the presentation. Just out of curiosity, unrelated to the Architectural Review Board, there seems to be a magic way to fit these structures in the building code. What is the construction type?
This would be a construction type 2B.
2B, okay. And is it sprinklered?
Yes, it will.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess in terms of the windows, and appreciate the practical consideration of folks storing things behind them. Rather than the vinyl, would it be possible to put a full partition behind the glass to be able to preserve some more depth in the appearance from the outside? Obviously, less depth in the storage unit.
Do you mean right behind the glass or this wall? I don't know how well we can see this. Let's try.
Yeah, either right or some distance. I mean, are there examples where, not as far as at the corner where you're circulating around it, but.
Sure. Yeah, this corner is a 5-foot corridor. This picture down here is showing that 30-inch deep display area.
I see.
And this is showing a storage unit that backs up right to the glass, where we did apply vinyl film to the inside. We can pull the partition back a bit, maybe not as far back as that, but it still would be white, and you're still gonna see just a white wall.
Okay. Do you ever paint it a different color, like black or gray?
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's possible.
Let's see. I think in terms of the corner elements, appreciate how you're relating to the other buildings around the area. I guess it's rare that we have brick sort of unsupported by brick, as is the case with the parapet here. And it looked like some of the other glass corners are really just pure glass elements at the corner. Would you consider any alternate approaches, either making, it seems like this corner is sort of midway between sort of the left-hand corner in this view and the images you showed us in the office buildings. Is there a way to push it in more to one direction or the other?
I think we can certainly take a look at that, and kind of come to a compromise one way or the other, so that it's a little bit, so these two corners are a little bit more consistent with each other.
Well, either that or more different. And is the CMU that you're proposing, would it be a ground face?
We aren't, well, I'll say it's a smooth face. It's not intended to be a ground face or a ground and sealed block either, but it is a smooth faced block.
I see. And would it be, I guess, what's categorized as a decorative concrete masonry unit or just a standard one?
Yes, it would be a pre-pigmented concrete masonry unit with more aesthetic aggregates included in the mix. I would say that.
Okay. Thank you. I think those are all the questions for me.
Okay.
Let's see, Carolyn, are there any comments from the public?
Not at this time, there isn't.
Thank you. We'll go into discussion, and I'll turn first to Fred. Fred, you're muted, I believe.
Got it. Thank you. I was just scrambling to pull up the staff report. So this is an initial site development plan and a first review. So I'm not sure how detailed to get with my comments. The one thing that I will say is that, first of all, I think the proportions and the blankness are well taken care of. I think that it will be interesting to see what we actually can see from the entrance corridor. My guess is, as I said, with the height and the distance, it may be mitigated a bit. My fellow ARB members may vote me off the board by saying this, but I'm wondering, we're talking about windows for the sake of windows and to break up blankness, but they're not really windows, and I'm not a huge fan of windows that aren't windows. So I almost wonder if, like we've done on other buildings, if you were to envision those windows going away in the middle of those two CMU piers, and then consider potentially, you can look at what the composition looks like, but then potentially another narrower band or pier that's in the middle to help break up, and you have sort of a, a systematic thing. You may be able to get away without the windows because of the distance. You as the developer, representing the developer, may not want that. You may want windows, in which case I think it's going to be a challenge to work with this vinyl and the transparency piece. But I'm just, those are my sort of off the top of my head comments. That's really all I had.
Thank you, Fred. Frank Hancock.
Thank you. I agree. I think if thinking about the windows, I really like the display areas image on your sheet, the example image. If we have windows, they should be clear, and there should be a hallway or something behind them. I don't know that I would be in favor of the display, leaving a little bit and having a partition. So I think that would be something to consider. And then I think Fred makes a great point. Then it's, maybe it's another architectural element or a material change that helps mitigate that. If you had to, instead of just relying on the EFIS kind of blocks. We're looking at the elevation without landscaping. I think it's helpful to see the other ones you have in the packet that show the line of trees. To think about it again, kind of that varied, yes, what you'll see from the road. But clearing this whole site and building this building, it's going to be pretty visible there. I don't know if we can only review what's in front of us. Know there's a collection of buildings proposed or designed, but don't know when they come online. But yeah, I mean, architecturally, I think it seems pretty evolved. Just a few minor things. I think, Dave, you made a great point about brick being supported by brick, at that main entrance. So that would be something I think to focus on. That's all I have.
Thank you, Frank. Frank Stoner?
Yeah, I'll start with the windows. And it's a little bit unclear to me how many of the windows are fake and how many are real as I look at these perspective renderings here. And maybe the applicant can clarify that, but I tend to agree with Frank and Fred. I'm not sure that windows that aren't really windows make a lot of sense. Although I think if it is the preferred solution, I think your suggestion, Dave, of pushing the wall back and painting it something other than white would be would help make the windows feel more legitimate. I'd be curious to see what the elevation would look like, that particular side elevation would look like if you took the windows out. I think the EFS colors need more contrast, and maybe they have them, and it just doesn't show well on the graphic that we looked at. But if there was a little more contrast there, that might, between the light and the dark EFS or the two different colors, that might help. And then maybe you do what they did at the AMC Theater, maybe a Regal Theater, and go with large green screen kind of at certain intervals along that elevation. I think, again, given its position, relative position on the corridor, it's probably less of an issue certainly than it would be for any of the front buildings. I agree with your suggestion regarding the brick supporting brick. Not sure whether it starts to look more like the one on the other end, or whether, as you say, you do something completely different. But I think that's it in terms of my comments.
Great, thank you, Frank. Well, appreciate everybody's comments. I agree. It'll be helpful, I think, for the applicant to share sections and other things that help illustrate the visibility of this from the entrance corridor. In some ways, as Frank pointed out, we have to look at what's in front of us. And I think if we were looking at the entire complex as an ensemble, the materials, the prominence, the relief of this building might not be as significant as they are in contemplating its first arrival on site. I think that I agree with Fred and Frank that I think there are other strategies for dealing with the blankness and the scale in that besides the windows. So if windows do go forward, I would prefer to see them with a recess of some kind so that they really seem to have some depth. But I do think the applicant could explore panelizing the wall more, adding green screens or sun screens or things that create light and shadow. I think just so long as there is adequate relief and relief much more pronounced than just a joint in the EFS. But let's see, all in all, I think a good beginning of the proposal. Let's see, I think with that, are we looking for any motion today? I guess could we turn to your recommendations, Margaret?
Yes, we need a motion on the initial site plan. I can share the list of comments if you'd like. I'll try and do that. Can you see the?
Yes. Yeah.
So this is the standard format for the initial site plan. The first bullet just is a recommendation for approval of the initial plan without conditions. The second bullet is a recommendation to consider installing the entrance corridor frontage trees with the first block that's constructed. No conditions are being recommended prior to issuance of a grading permit. And then 1 through 11 were the site and architectural comments to be addressed in future submittals. So I think there's some of these here you probably want to sounds like you want to amend. And maybe some that you want to add.
Can I ask a question, Margaret?
Go ahead.
Are we reviewing the initial site plan for the whole development? Or is the initial site plan just for this building?
It's the initial site plan for the whole development, and then you're just looking at the a preliminary architectural design for the storage building.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So any suggested amendments to some of the items we discussed today?
I'll just throw a couple things out if I could. On number 1, maybe it's continue to refine the storage building design to provide greater organization and unity among various building elements, just so that I think we acknowledge that this is a preliminary and they're still working. I think the eliminate the film coating from the windows. We could potentially add, sorry, Margaret, I'll wait.
Catching up, just almost there. Okay.
No worries. Just, just thinking, I'm thinking out loud here, so probably don't type yet. Just thinking, eliminate the film coating from the windows, or Dave, you probably have better language for this, provide, some sort of a recess to allow for the transparency to read through, or something like that.
Yeah, I think, Margaret, you're crafting it well, it looks like. And then I don't know, Fred, do you want to include anything like alternatively consider different strategies for breaking up the scale and avoiding blankness in the facade?
Perfect.
Great. Any other suggestions?
Do we want to require sections, or do we just say that, sections may be beneficial, or applicants should consider providing sections?
Yeah, I think it would certainly, it would certainly be very helpful. I think that's a very good point, Fred. And to the point of, really, where it is.
Yeah,
Probably fair to require sections, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I'd be comfortable with that too, if folks prefer, if we just say provide. Great. Anything else, or is there a motion?
I'll move that we forward the recommendations outlined in the staff report to the agent for the site review committee, amended as follows. Regarding the final site plan submittal, revise comment number 1 to state, continue to refine the storage building design to provide greater organization and unity among the various building elements. Modify number 3 to state, eliminate the film coating from the windows or provide an internal recess to allow window transparency. Alternatively, consider other strategies to break up scale and blankness. And then add number 12, provide site sections to clarify visibility of the storage building from the entrance corridor.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Stoner,
Aye.
Mr. Hancock,
Aye.
Mr. Vanderwerf,
Aye.
Mr. Missile.
Aye.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So coming up on 3, would folks like any break, or everybody ready to keep on rolling?
Rolling.
Okay, great. Move on to ARB item 2020-117, Green Clean Initial Plan and Preliminary Architectural Review. Thank you, Chris. We're seeing your preview now.
Are you viewing the correct screen now?
Looks good.
Okay. All right. The application I'm presenting on now is the review of the architecture and initial site plan to construct a 3,700 square foot car wash building, related equipment and associated site improvements. This site is located at 3920 Worth Crossing at the intersection of Worth Crossing and Route 29. The ARB reviewed the site plan for the existing bank and a number of sign applications for this property since 1999. Staff did have a number of comments on the site, but none of them were significant enough to keep us from recommending approval of the initial site plan. So I'm going to focus on the 2 points that were listed as the primary points of discussion in the staff report and the equipment related to the car wash. There's equipment proposed outside the building, but due to its location, most of the equipment is not expected to have an impact on the entrance corridor. Regarding the landscaping proposed for the site, there are a few minor issues. Notably, the landscaping gaps along the entrance corridor frontage in the northern perimeter of the site, and the amount of large trees proposed along the interior roads surrounding the site. Additionally, there are no utilities or easements shown along Route 29, but electrical service for this site has not been indicated on the plans. Staff is recommending revising the landscape plan to show large shade trees extending along the full frontage of Route 29, 2 additional large trees, 1 parallel to Worth Crossing, 1 parallel to Fortune Park Road, 2.5-inch caliper at planting to satisfy the interior planting requirements, 1 large tree and additional shrubs in the planting gap along the northern perimeter of the site, and showing the location of electrical service on the plans. The proposed building has minimal ties to historic architecture of the area, notably the material and detailing of the proposed building. However, the white brick, while similar to the existing bank building, it is not present in other nearby buildings along the corridor. Regarding the west elevation visible from Route 29, the length is divided into bays through the use of windows topped by awnings and downspouts between the windows. However, the regularity of the design combined with the lack of entrance or other hierarchical feature, minimum detailing, and the available views into the backs of the false tower elements on the parking lot elevation emphasizes the appearance of the entrance corridor facing side of the building as a rear elevation. So we recommend that the west elevation be revised, and we offer some suggestions, including adding architectural details such as height variation, greater variation in material changes, and using a more muted earth tone brick to reduce the back of the building appearance and integrate the building into the surrounding area. Staff is recommending approval of the initial site plans with the recommendations listed in the staff report to be addressed with the final site plan. I would be happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Great, thank you, Chris. Frank Stoner, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions, Dave.
Okay. Fred? No. Frank Hancock?
No questions.
No questions. Thanks, Chris.
No, none for me either. Thank you, Chris, for your report. We'll turn to the applicant for their presentation.
Sure. Thank you, Chris, for that presentation. That was really well done. This is Craig Dan Bremen with Green Clean Auto Wash. Just a little bit about our company. We're currently developing about 10 sites throughout the state of Virginia. We have 2 coming in Richmond And then the majority of those sites are actually down in the Hampton Roads area where our company is located. I'm actually an Albemarle County resident. I live here in Crozet. I've been here for about 10 years. So very excited about the opportunity to be in Albemarle County, especially along one of the entrance corridors. So I think we've tried our best to really find a site that was by right zoning, and then also we could work our architectural elements to meet the entrance corridor requirements. So our team on the line today, Ryan, our engineer, and Kevin, who's our architect, we had a chance to review the comments last week from the staff report. I think we've already made some progress in making sure that we're heading the right directions with the entrance corridor. And with that, I'll kind of turn it over to Ryan to talk more specifically about the site, unless there's any questions for me. Go ahead, Ryan.
Gotcha. Hi, everyone. This is Ryan Perkins with Kimley Horn. So kind of just real quick, obviously this is fairly straightforward. So the site is an existing bank building. It's got no accesses directly off of Route 29. There's an access on both of the side streets. We're proposing to maintain both of those. So circulation will generally feel the same. The orientation of the building for the new tunnel is generally in the same orientation or location as the existing bank building. The existing bank building has circulation on all four sides. We're proposing that we won't have circulation on the Route 29 side of the building. So what you're gonna end up with is a lot more green area and areas for potential landscaping if we need to go that route. So we're actually pulling the imperviousness back from Route 29 by about 45 feet to the building face that we're proposing. And on the opposite side, on the Fortune Park Road side, you'll get an additional 25 feet of green space before our parking lot begins. So that's not very typical in most of the projects I'm dealing with, is where we're going by about half an acre or so less impervious. So fair amount of room for flexibility to address your landscaping concerns. Most of the comments were in regards to landscaping and architecture. I'll let Kevin speak to architecture. But in terms of landscaping, we're generally not opposed to any of the comments that were made. We do request clarification on a few when the time comes. Along Route 29, basically there's a lot of existing vegetation out there, a lot of mature trees, and that's around the whole site in general. And we're not proposing to take any of that down. If you see our limits of disturbance, it's on most of our sheets, but specifically on our landscaping sheet, we're not touching any of the existing trees. We're trying to keep everything that's out there. It's all mature. It's all in good shape. So what we're trying to do with our landscaping is just supplement it. So we're adding a few trees along the frontages where needed to meet code. We're adding specifically on Worth Crossing, we were proposing one additional tree because we were assuming that 4 were required. And I believe that's what's stated in the code, but we were still recommended to add another tree. So I guess I would want clarification on that. And if you look at what's out there, the canopy of the existing trees along Worth Crossing and what we're proposing, we're just not sure we can add an additional tree. And that's the same thing on Fortune Park Road. We believe we're providing the minimum requirement for street trees on that frontage as well. But I think the comment was to add an additional street tree. Again, we're not totally opposed to it, but there's just not a whole lot of room once the canopies, once it grows up. There's a fair amount of comments about can you see, or questions about can you see the pay stations from Route 29. The pay stations, if you're looking at the plan view, it's plan east or plan right. There's going to be 2 pay stations as you enter off of Fortune Park Road. If you're heading north on Route 29, the building is going to pretty much block all visibility of the pay stations. If you're driving on 29 and past the building, there might be a very small window for a split second where you could see the pay stations. So we did have a bump out island against the building with a street tree proposed. We understand there's some comments to put them on the northern side of the properties to add some additional trees, maybe an evergreen or a hedgerow to further screen it from that view, which we can, we have the room for it. But I think if you would look at an aerial overlay or Google aerial even, you can see that our neighbor, the First Citizens Bank, they have a full line of mature trees along their entire southern boundary, which will be our northern boundary. And obviously we're not touching any of that. So we think there's plenty of vegetation out there to block the pay stations from view from the entrance corridor for sure. There's some additional comments about adding dumpster screening and dumpster detail. So of course we can do that as well. So that's kind of it for the site. I can answer any questions on the site, or we could just turn it over to Kevin for some elements on the architecture and then answer any questions after that about the project as a whole.
Okay, any questions before we move on? No? Okay, good. Take it away.
Okay, I'm gonna try to share my screen here. Okay, so did that work? Can people see a drawing? Is it coming up? Here we go. Okay, so first, can everybody hear me?
I can hear you. I'm not seeing. Oh, here it
There we
comes.
go.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so what I have on the screen is two elevations. The first one is what was originally submitted. And then Craig and Ryan and I went over comments last week. We came up with the elevation that's on the top. And this just kind of shows things we did to address the comments. So the most obvious thing is we added some relief to the building. Some, obviously the first one's very flat. So we pulled some elements forward, raised some parapet heights and kind of gave it, a little more visual interest, making it look more like the front of a building. The other side of the building has a lot of detailing, but that's the side that the customers interact with. So, we did some massing. Bringing up the parapet height kind of hides one of the back sides of the other parapets. There were comments on that. The back side of the tall parapet that you can still see, we decided to continue the soldier course around that just to make it look more finished. So we added the relief. We're also talking about changing the color. We proposed white, and we can do something that's two-tone, more like natural earth tone masonry colors. And so we're kind of representing that here. We don't have a color drawing, but you can see the lower half is kind of shaded, representing a darker brick color. And then there's brick bands across the top that will also be in that color. And then the majority of the masonry will be a lighter tone. Very similar to I believe it's a Target building across the street. So I think that that's kind of a visual picture of what we're trying to do to address the comments from the review board. So I guess I'll leave it at that and offer to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kevin. So turning first to Frank Hancock.
Thank you for the presentation. I don't think I have any questions. Just the parapet on the customer side, that's what has the logo. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that hiding anything or any mechanical equipment or anything, or is it just?
No, another one of the comments was mechanical equipment. Fortunately, on this building, all the mechanical equipment is located inside the building. So there's no instance where you'll see a rooftop unit or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any questions anymore.
Okay, Frank Stone. You may be muted, Frank. So Frank, I believe you're muted. So, Frank, do you have any questions? Oh, and I think you're muted still, Frank.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I just I just finished asking my question and I couldn't figure out why nobody was responding. My question's about the parapet on the customer side and whether that's as tall as it is because it needs to be that tall to accommodate the signage, or is there a way that parapet could be reduced to correspond better to what you're proposing on the 29 side?
It is that height largely due to the signage.
Do you have a rendering of or a picture of that side of the building we could look at?
Maybe in the original presentation, there'll be one. I don't think I have one readily available that I could screen share, unfortunately.
I do. I can share my screen. 1 second. If you could stop sharing your screen real quickly. Are you viewing the perspectives now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so you can see that element is as tall as it is, largely due to the signage.
And do you all know whether the signage as shown there is approvable in Albemarle County? Because you may find
It likely is not. We need to shrink that signage. I'm almost certain.
With that, or Frank, are you talking about the signage interior of the site? I believe if not, it should have been in the comment that because that signage is not visible, it wouldn't be reviewed.
But still have to follow the ordinance requirements for
Ordinance. So yeah, ordinance. Yeah.
size, and we did not do those calculations.
Gotcha. Okay, that's my only question.
Okay, thank you. Fred?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for your presentation. Just a couple quick clarifications, I guess. Looking at the elevations, Kevin, that you put up there, you know, they're pure elevations, right? So I'm wondering, at some point, we'll want to see kind of an oblique angle, right, of what each of those elements on the front look like at an angle. And, it, you know, so it doesn't look just like sort of a Western facade, you know, for one of those Western movies that's kind of propped up. And then I had the same question Frank Stoner had, which was relative to the height of that signage portion. And if you find that the sign has to be reduced due to ordinance requirements, I would encourage you to look at lowering that element so it doesn't feel like it's out of place as viewed from the entrance corridor.
Okay.
That's all I had.
Thank you, Fred. No, I think you and Frank have asked the questions I had. I share the concerns you just voiced, Fred, that the height and the parapet look resolved in terms of sort of the overall mass and form of the building and not just a facade. And I think to the extent you may find you need more height for the sign, certainly if you look at ways to integrate the eastern facade with the western in an overall building form that works, that may be a way to do that and still achieve some height. Let's see, in terms of, and I think the initial proposal was for white and gray. It looked like concrete units. You're still proposing concrete for the facade, is that right? Just in a different color?
Yeah, it'll be a different color. It is concrete block. It is like the rough face with some texture to it. It does look like a brick.
At a
as far as
larger scale,
color and
correct?
tone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
How big are the bricks? Sorry, Dave.
No, it's a good question, Frank.
They're 4 by 8 by 16 long. So they're 8-inch wide, they're 4-inch tall, and then they're 16-inch long.
Okay. Well, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? I guess we'll go into discussion. Fred, start with you.
Thanks, Dave. I don't really have anything to add beyond what we just all discussed. Thank you.
Great. Frank Stoner?
Yeah, Dave, I don't have anything to add either. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Thank you. Frank Hancock?
Sure. I think the site plan is really nice. I think taking advantage of that existing landscaping, and that's a huge benefit that the site has. And so often we see proposals like this in the 29 corridor where they're jamming parking or jamming things, you know, that maybe we don't want to see right up against the entrance corridor. So I think that's really nice to have that green space, be able to plant the requirements. You know, and looking at it, I almost think I guess it's the east elevation maybe presents more like an appropriate facade for the entrance corridor. And I like kind of the rhythm and the simplicity of the original proposal versus what you kind of flashed up in the presentation. I just felt like it was more honest and just cleaner. I don't have a preference on color. You know, it's a pretty light colored building that's there now. There's definitely precedent for, you know, white painted brick. I'm okay with that. So I think it's a nice proposal. So I think there's a few tweaks. I think we all hit on the parapet, and that seems unresolved from the corridor, just, you know, three-sided like that. I think that needs some attention. And then, you know, what's the front door? How does this read from the entrance corridor? So that's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Frank, and appreciate your highlighting all the positive attributes of the site plan. I think it is a good proposal. That way it's great to see less impervious area in the overall watershed, and the opportunity for really full landscaping. And I think the vacuum started out in the right place on this one, so happy to see that. So why don't we turn now to staff's recommendations?
I'll just comment too, car washes are really hot right now. I think we have one every meeting.
Okay, so can you see the list of comments? Okay, so this is similar to the last application that we just reviewed. This is the standard format for recommendations on initial site plan. The first bullet, just like the last one, is stating that the ARB is recommending approval of the initial plan without conditions. There are no just recommendations as it relates to the guidelines. Standard condition related to grading permit is provide the conservation checklist in the site plan, and then the list of both site and architectural comments for the to be addressed with the next submittal. So I don't know if you want to make changes to number 2, which talks about the appearance of the entrance corridor facing elevation.
I'm okay with that language.
Yeah, I think it still works for me. I don't know that we could add some note about, you know, resolving the parapets at the corners so that they resolve the building massing effectively, but I think the applicants had a chance to hear that. I don't know if we have to put it in the record.
Okay. Did you want to add number 2 to indicate whether or not the revised elevation that was shown during the meeting is in the right direction?
I would agree with that.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it is more appropriate than the initial one.
Yeah, I do too.
I disagree for the record.
That's good. Somebody's got to disagree every now and then.
Indeed, we have to have a diversity of opinion.
We agree way too much.
We do. No, we don't.
Great. Anything else, or? Is there
Can
a
I
motion?
ask, do the other ARB members have a preference on white or more of a natural brick?
I can say at least personally, I think they're probably both appropriate to the corridor. I think looking at it in the context of that development, I think could be illuminating. I don't know that, I think staff noted that the existing white building is the only one there. So I think both can be appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
You want to change anything at number 3? Consider revising the proposed white brick to a more traditional color.
I think what gives me pause on this is the brick they're using is not a traditional brick.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. It's more of it's a concrete block.
It's a concrete block. Yeah.
Right. So in terms of how it weathers and wears, and also with moisture in the wash, whether it's a reasonable concern. Yeah, I think that, that's a good point. I think, Frank, as you highlight that, I do think since it's, I think if it's a concrete unit, something in a more natural tone is probably more appropriate from my perspective.
Can I clarify what you guys are talking about? So when you say natural versus traditional, I mean, when I initially read that, I thought, traditional brick is red, and maybe I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, but.
Right. I guess I was probably thinking that there is a tradition of, white painted brick on some buildings in the area, but Frank helpfully points out this is not really brick, it's concrete block. And so it's more of a, mineral.
I mean, I guess we could suggest they consider a more traditional brick form, in which case I think painted brick would be perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, when I look at the elevations and the renderings, I guess they're really more the renderings. They're rendered as normal brick.
They're rendered as normal brick, yeah.
They are. It's a jumbo scale. It's roughly double the size of traditional brick.
Right, but it's like soldier courses and it's standard.
Yeah.
My sense is, I don't know, maybe I'm off here, but the way it's rendered may not accurately reflect the material type.
Right. I think you're right.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, we really need to see it accurately rendered so we can understand, what the header courses actually look like.
Right.
And those different elements on the building. And so.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, we just need a lot of clarification around that.
Yeah. And this may be a case where samples would be helpful if they could be available to stop by and see at the county building.
Yeah.
So what I've got is consider revising the proposed material to a more traditional brick form and or a natural earth tone color. Accurately reflect the proposed material in the drawings and renderings. Provide material samples for review. Does that capture what your concerns?
I believe so.
You've got the material samples in number 1. I assume that covered everything. But...
It's already there. Yep, you're right.
Yeah, I think so. Any other thoughts on that one?
Nope.
And all these are just sort of the boilerplate, I believe. So any motion?
I will move for the recommendations outlined in the staff report. The agent for site review committee amended as follows. Number 2, we're adding most ARB members agreed the revised elevations.
The big blue tags are back, and so are the river delivered. Blue tag specials.
During the meeting is moving the right direction. Modify item 3 to consider revising the proposed material to a more traditional brick form and or natural earth tone color, accurately reflect the proposed material in the drawings and the renderings.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Carolyn, could you call the vote?
Mr. Stoner,
Aye.
Mr. Hancock,
Aye.
Mr. Vanderwerf,
Aye.
and Mr. Missile.
Aye.
Great, thank you very much. Let's see, well, we do have a few items of other business. Folks are okay, we'll keep on rolling along. The first one is the Aldi sign.
I will share my screen again. Can you see my slide?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Just have a quick presentation here. Let me adjust it. So you can see. Okay. Just a little bit of history. At the October 5th, 2020 meeting, the ARB discussed a proposed renovation of a portion of the Albemarle Square Shopping Center for an Aldi store. A part of the proposal was the installation of 2 cabinet-style wall signs. Staff's recommendation on the signs was to revise the cabinets to channel letter style signs. After discussion with staff and the applicant, the ARB's action was to say that the sign design must be submitted for staff review and further consideration. In early November, the applicant submitted a revised sign design. The revision included a change to the recommended sign type. The revised sign is composed of channel letters and a logo. That sign type is consistent with others in the shopping and similar, consistent with what's typically proposed and approved in the entrance quarters. Staff commented, however, that the logo appeared overscaled in relation to the letters. Entrance quarter sign guidelines discourage overscaled logos. The staff consulted with the ARB chairperson who supported staff's recommendation. That information was forwarded to the applicant. Applicant was disappointed with this determination and provided renderings comparing their preferred logo size, which is shown here, with a reduced logo size consistent with an image that was included in our email exchange. The reduction is illustrated in this image and is 60% of the applicant's preferred size. And I've been here side by side for easier comparison. The applicant's image response was shared with the ARB chairperson, who recommended that the issue be brought to the full board for discussion. And just for reference, the overall proposed sign height is 12 feet, with the logo at 7 feet 7 and 7/8 inches tall, and the letters are 3 feet 5/8 inches tall. And that's all I've got, unless you would like me to go back and show any image in this set.
Thank you, Margaret. Any questions for Margaret, Fred?
No, sir.
Okay.
Thank you,
Frank.
Margaret.
Yeah, Frank Hancock.
How did we arrive at the 60%?
I think it was just an eyeball, what looks not overscaled.
Thank you.
Yeah, Frank Hancock.
Frank Stoner or Frank Hancock?
Oh, excuse me, Frank Stoner.
Okay. I don't have any questions.
Thank you. And Margaret, any additional context about scale of logos and precedents in the county that you can offer?
I pulled a couple of images in this slide. I think you can see a few of the logos here. They're not all the same height as the letters. Some of them do exceed the height of the letters. I think in staff's review of these, we are often trying for balance between the logo and the overall size of the letters. It's hard to it can be hard, pulling some of these and saying we're comparing apples to apples. And the views from the road are different. The lower image here is right up on the corridor. The upper image is from Albemarle Square Shopping Center, but it has a very angled and more distant view from the Porter Street. This image here on the left is from the sign guidelines, and this is talking about placement and scale. The lower image is showing an overscaled logo. I don't think the sign guidelines include images of every possible combination.
A basic indication that it normally relates fairly closely to the height and size of the text and normally in line with it.
And I think some of these images are combining concepts, relationship of the placement of the logo with the letters, the size of the logo compared to the letters, and illumination as well. So mixing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, thank you for that background. Great. Well, I guess we could turn to the applicant for their presentation. Kevin.
Thank you very much. And thanks as always to Margaret for the back and forth that she was able to facilitate. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Carolyn, could I request that Justin Sproul also be made a panelist? He'll be joining me from Aldi. And I am going to share my screen here in a moment. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to touch base on a few of the technical considerations that we're considering when we evaluate the logo from a scale and a proportion perspective. And as as Margaret has mentioned, one of the things we're considering is the visibility from the entrance corridor, the scale, the proportion, how it relates to the building facade, what we have to go through to see the visibility of the sign from the entrance corridor. And so the first slide that's up on the screen right now just shows some distances from the entrance corridor, both the Rio Road and the Route 29 entrance corridors. And an interesting consideration is everywhere the red line is dotted has screened views or limited views due to out parcel buildings or existing landscaping. There is a portion of the facade that is visible along the Rio Road. But even from there, we're a couple hundred feet away from the proposed signage, and we are about 22 feet down in elevation change. So as we evaluate the relationship of these things, the facade and the signage, we're also certainly considering the views from the entrance corridor throughout. So here's just some screenshots, some existing conditions of what those views are as they're screened through the existing landscape, through these out parcel buildings, both the existing SunTrust Bank and also the Texas Roadhouse Steakhouse. So one thing that we always look for guidelines and constraints as we set out to, considerations, whether that's zoning, whether that's ARB entrance corridor requirements, building code, all these things that get thrown into the pot. The Albemarle County zoning language is set up kind of thoughtfully on signage where it's based on the amount of linear footage that you have on a roadway. And so this building has 160 linear feet of frontage on the Route 29 entrance corridor and 180 feet on the Rio Road entrance corridor. And in this zoning district, that allows for 1.5 square feet per 1 linear foot of established structure frontage, with no individual sign to exceed 200 square feet. If there is 2 walls that are adjacent to an entrance corridor or to a street, then you can take 1/3 of the secondary street. So we're allowed 330 square feet. If you do that in 2 equal signs, that'd be 165 square feet of signs, roughly 12 foot by 12 foot sign. The proposed sign is 12 feet by 11 feet, which is approximately 80% of the allowable square footage. Similarly, and just sort of continuing that thought process, the facade area, 3,625 square feet along Route 29 for 3.6% of the facade to be a sign, 3,900 square feet of the Rio Road of a facade area for 3.3% of the facade to be a sign. And I know that the question is not necessarily the amount, the size of the sign, it's the proportion of the logo to the channel letters and things like that. But I think that when we look at and when we evaluate the design of the sign holistically, and we take into consideration the large building and it's a quarter tenant, there can be some logic for enhanced visibility from the entrance corridor. So here is the rendering from the entrance corridor. And looks like I did not relink the right image, but as Margaret has shown, the 60% was significantly smaller. That 60%, just to answer, I believe it was Frank, your question on where that came from. In the back and forth with county staff and with the board chair, there was a little snippet that had been done that had, tried to scale it and say, hey, maybe this would be more appropriate. So we tried to recreate that snippet from the county staff and from the board advice. So let me see if I can real quickly pull those 2 up just to clarify that.
Kevin, I can pull it up again if you prefer.
So this is as proposed. And then this would be revised. So those are some of the technical things that we're considering when we're evaluating these 2. And I would just like to invite Justin to also, chime in here with any information from Aldi that he'd like to add.
Good afternoon, everybody. You guys have already had a long day. Just want to make sure you can hear me okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks for the time. Just wanted to kind of reiterate, talk a little bit about the logo and the branding for Aldi. We are trying to do some significant changes here to this particular shopping center and kind of help revitalize that area there. And that branding and the logo is critical to us. And I think I mentioned that to you all on our last call when we were kind of discussing this preliminarily. So it is vitally important. It is about who we are, and we're already missing out on the original logo that we do in most of our in most municipalities, with the different colors and the kind of the box around there that I think that Margaret had shown that photo right at the beginning. So what we have here definitely is a substantial deviation already. And with that distance from that center, we want to ensure that we don't end up like the last 2 tenants. And we, if we're that big A on there would make a huge difference for us. So, based on the time we're spending, the effort we're spending, and what we're trying to do, and the Aldi branding, that becomes one of our mission critical items in these types of discussions. So, you know, I definitely sincerely ask for your consideration on the larger design that we presented here.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I guess we'll turn to members for any questions they may have, starting with Frank Hancock.
I don't have any questions. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate all the research and the graphic representation. It's really helpful.
Thank you, Frank Stoner.
I don't have any questions, Ted.
Fred?
Nope, no questions. But Kevin, when you were describing a change in the image that was coming to our screen, it did not change on my screen. So I did not see the original versus the 60%. Could we see that side by side, please?
Yeah, let me see if I can do the flip a
Pull
little
up
bit
the
better.
side by side. I can pull up the side by
Margaret
side
can do it.
if you prefer.
Okay, that's great.
And I know I should know this, but just this is all illuminated, right? Internally illuminated?
Yeah, that's great.
Can you see the images?
Yes, thank you. That's perfect.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. I have no other questions.
Okay, thank you, Fred. I don't have any either. Carolyn, are there any members of the public wishing to comment?
Not at this time, no.
Thank you. Well, then invite members into discussion. Fred, do you want to lead us off?
I always hate being first. Well, so this, I mean, this, you know, I am very sympathetic, especially in this case, to a company coming in and wanting to revitalize an area that's already in pretty rough shape. And I have a hard time, while I understand the aesthetic of the oversized A on top of the sign and the top heavy appearance. And, you know, my gut tells me maybe it's not 60, it's somewhere around 80 to compromise percent. You know, that's, I was glad to hear that they're both internally illuminated, because I think that's going to be key. So I guess I'm rambling, but my sense is, yes, the original is overscaled and there's a precedent issue with us looking at that. I think it's significantly set back from the entrance corridor. And that's a mitigating factor, which I think is very helpful. You know, if push came to shove, I would prefer something around the 80% range as a you know, compromise. So hope that makes sense. That's all I had.
Thank you, Fred. Frank Hancock.
I agree with Fred. I think the original is too big, but I think the 60% is too small. Maybe a way to think about it is to bring the graphic or the logo within the confines of the text, or even maybe a little bit smaller. It seems to expand beyond that. So I don't know, maybe it's even 85. I don't know. I don't think it needs to shrink a ton, but I actually think the 60% is too small for the logo to be on top of it like that.
Thank you, Frank. Frank Stoner.
I'd probably echo what both Fred and Frank have suggested. I think the original is out of scale. I think maybe there's an opportunity for the Aldi letters even to get a little bit bigger, and maybe to Frank Hancock's, or I guess both of their points, you know, we could settle somewhere in the middle at 80%. 60 doesn't feel too small to me. It actually feels well proportioned, but I'm also sympathetic to their concerns over visibility, which again makes me wonder whether the Aldi letters could even get slightly larger to maintain the relationship, that kind of appropriate relationship between the letters and the logo. And that's all.
Thank you very much, Frank. Well, appreciate my fellow members' comments. I think, like them, I'm sympathetic to and very appreciative of the investment in the community. I think there are mitigating factors, the distance from the road here. And also, I think Aldi is a very short name, relative to some of the other names where they have the advantage of a lot more text to scale the logo to. I think it's mainly from the perspective of precedent in the county that I'm most concerned about the scale of the logo, and so appreciate fellow members' consideration of some adjustment in scale, and I think like them would be open to exploring to find the sweet spot with the applicant, but hopefully somewhere smaller than the initial proposal. I think Frank Stoner's suggestion that maybe through a combination of increasing text and decreasing logo, there might be a way to compromise. And also Fred and Frank's comments about looking for a space between 60% and the original proposal is reasonable to me as well.
Margaret, would you mind if I shared my screen again? We did happen to anticipate this, as you may have guessed. So just real quickly, 100%. I don't know why this isn't flipping. 60%, and then that is an 80% version. I'm sorry that they're not all on the same screen at the same time, but an 80% could be amenable to us as well. There's the 60%. If you can, I can maybe attempt to zoom into a equal amount here.
Can you zoom into an 80%? Because I don't think it changed on my screen.
Yeah, I don't believe I saw the change between 60 and 80 either.
Okay, are we seeing, let's see, what are you seeing? Are you seeing the zoomed in, there's the 80%.
Not currently. It may be that you need to reshare your screen or share the full desktop in order to be able to.
Ah, I see. Okay, all right. So that's part of the problem here. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate you bearing with me here. Does that is, this would be the 80% here. I'm going to zoom into a 20, and then I'm going to flip between that. Did that change?
Yeah, that changed.
Okay. All right. So there's the 60, 80, 100.
80% looks good to me. I think that's a decent compromise.
Sure. So is there a motion?
Happy to make the motion. I'm not sure how to word it other than to say that I move that the logo on the Aldi project be reduced to 80% of full scale as presented.
Great. And may I suggest we add to the motion, just for the record, that due to the project's distance from the entrance corridor and the interrupted views and the short name of the company, in this instance, the larger scale logo is acceptable.
That's a good add. I have one quick question maybe for Kevin. Did you all, and this gets to what Frank was maybe suggesting in terms of making the letters a little bit larger. Did you all look at an outer perimeter that might help offset it from the light color of the background? Maybe that doesn't work with your brand, but just curious.
I'll answer it, Kevin. We actually have some similar discussions with like a national team. So I have a national team that I kind of run some of these non-prototypical things by. And I had a suggestion for taking the dark blue from the logo. You know, it's not here, but it's not shown here, but there's a dark blue in our traditional, and throwing that up as a background and putting the A on top of it. And that Fred was rejected as a background. So yes, it was considered, and you know, it never made it to Kevin.
Got it. Thank you.
So Margaret, I don't know if you had a chance to capture Fred's eloquent summary. Is there a second for the motion?
Second.
Carolyn, could you call the vote?
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Vanderwerf,
Aye.
Mr. Hancock,
Aye.
Mr. Stoner.
Aye.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone, for considering this fully.
Yes, thank you very much for the consideration. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Look
missed
forward
who
to seeing.
seconded that.
Was it Frank Hancock who seconded?
Stoner.
No, it was Frank Stoner. Great. Well, we have just a couple brief items left, if folks can make it a little longer. Wanted to talk briefly about our review of the entrance corridor guidelines, and in particular the work to sort of study the contributing buildings and landscapes in the corridors. Thank you very much to everybody for volunteering to taking a look at some of those areas. I've drafted a potential schedule for us to aspire to, at least for next year, for when and how we might review them. I don't know if folks have had a chance to review it. We don't have to necessarily dig into it fully here. So there's a spreadsheet I think Margaret sent. So the first tab, and this just sort of generally organizes more sort of by directional quadrant, starting at the west, looking then at the east, and then at the south, and then at the north, and sort of grouping the entrance corridors there. I didn't measure miles, but where it looked like there were a couple that could be combined, where they were in one person's portfolio, suggested that. I think, I guess I would ask maybe if folks if they've had a chance to look over it, if there are any suggested revisions. We could also handle those offline. I would think, Margaret, if folks had any, they could send those requests to you.
Yes.
Okay.
Requests to me. We want to avoid having real-time email communication among A or B members, so we don't inadvertently hold a unadvertised meeting.
Of course, and then if this is acceptable, or if there are a couple minor edits, we could try to have those in place for next meeting, and then adopt it and take it away next year. How does that sound to folks? Happy to circle around. Fred? Yep.
I think I'm on mute. Is what I said. Sorry. I think that sounds great. Thank you, first of all, for all your work on this. This is a great way to kind of capture and summarize everything. I think the schedule looks great. I looked at this briefly, and I will spend more time on it. My initial thought was, and maybe it's in here, it number one says order. I'm looking at the precedent studies schedule Excel spreadsheet. Number one says orderly and attractive development reflecting the traditions of the area. Is there something that talks about its reflection of the current corridor that it's within?
On the next one.
Yeah,
That's
and
the
this
next one.
was a very quick attempt at, you know, I
Oh,
took
yeah.
yeah, I used the great staff report and just shows the first 10 criteria to try and condense them. And if there were a way to condense this further, or conversely, if there are other criteria to add in here to remind us as we're looking, would welcome those suggestions. And the purpose of this form is really just to sort of set a template that each of us might use and try to complete as best we can as we look at the areas we're studying.
It's great.
I guess to Fred's point, though, if we're ultimately looking to reflect or develop guidelines that reflect the fact that the corridors are different in terms of their character, then I'm not sure how these 10 items would or should be modified to enable that. I don't know if that makes any sense, but we kind of have a.
Right. No, I think that's a great point, that maybe creating something that's explicitly about what's unique about how this contributes to the corridor, the unique character of the corridor that this relates to, something that helps us record in a way that separate from the general guidelines is focused really on the corridor itself.
Yeah, Frank, you're getting at exactly what I was thinking of too. I'm wondering just if the character of the courtyard, or sorry, character of the corridor could be broken out as its own, because, you know, historic sites, site layout, landscaping seem to go together. I don't know if that helps with what we're talking about, but it's a start, right? I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then are we just expecting to kind of check the box, or would we actually kind of rank or rate how successfully the building achieves any particular criteria or reflects that? You know, respect the architectural traditions. Maybe it's not an absolute yes.
That's a good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. I think initially I thought it's just sort of a checklist, and you know, because some of the things we might say meet some of the criteria, but don't
That's right.
meet others. But I certainly would be open if folks wanted to use some kind of scale to say it really satisfies that criteria or it just barely does.
I think it would be helpful if there were words added into those boxes, saying, you know, what is it that's reflecting the traditions, or you know, what is it about the what's orderly, what's attract, you know, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. And probably words more than numbers from your perspective,
like,
Margaret. Yeah.
For example, you know, if you're going to put a check in the box that says sensitivity to existing natural landscape, well, what is it that's showing the sensitivity?
Is there enough room in the, I mean, is that just what the notable characteristics column is for?
It could be that it gets summarized there. Sort of.
So we just go in and check all that apply and then elaborate in that notable characteristics column.
That could be an approach.
Remind me, is the ultimate goal of this to be able to have these as examples to show applicants to help guide their design? Yeah. Okay.
I think it's for applicants and for staff and for board members, so that we're all understanding. We all have examples of what the guidelines mean and how we're interpreting them.
Got it.
Yeah, and so, you know, certainly if members have a chance to contemplate, you know, how they might fill out one or two between now and next meeting, and that might reveal some things that need to be added, adjusted, or clarified. And one other question, more about process. I don't know, Margaret, does the county have the ability to host this in like a shared document format, or that we could all work on remotely as we work, or is it something where we'll need to do our own versions and then there'll be some work to collate it all?
A good question. Let me look into that a little bit more.
Okay. And also whether 4 board members working on one document constitutes a meeting.
You could probably be adding to it all, no problem. Just add it. But I'll look into that, see
Right.
what we can do to make it easy.
Okay. Great. Well, any other, so I think, why don't we find a way to add something about the character of the corridor, and whether that's an additional column like notable characteristics that we just expand on in text, or it seems like that might be helpful to have another text box that's really focused on the corridor.
You might have one of these charts for each corridor. So maybe maybe it's part of the title, or there's a section above this that indicates the corridor, and then significant characteristics or character of the corridor that was kind of a general.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah, I had thought if we were able to keep it all in one tab, it would allow applicants or staff or ourselves to do sorts by corridor, by characteristic, by
I see. Yeah.
by material. But I, and I think that's I imagine through this study we will identify some additional characteristics and qualities that we need to find a way to capture.
Yeah, because there's, I guess there some of these corridors, for example, 64. I don't know how many buildings there really are on 64.
Right, pine trees.
And Centera.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
And a jail.
Yep. Yeah, if you squint, it looks a little bit like Star Wars, but. So, okay, well, great. Well, again, appreciate very much everybody's willingness to invest the effort and the time in looking at these areas together. And so as you reflect on this, just send Margaret any suggestions, and if this is generally acceptable to folks, we'll maybe adopt it at our next meeting.
Sounds good.
Great. Okay, next item is the minutes for November 16th, 2020. Is there a motion to approve them?
So moved.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Third and fourth. All right, Carolyn, what you call the vote?
Okay, Mr. Stoner,
Aye.
Mr. Hancock,
Abstain.
Mr. Vanderwerf.
I don't think I was at that meeting.
No, you weren't. Yeah.
You weren't. I'm sorry. You just caught me off guard.
Aye.
Mr. Missile.
Aye.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, our next meeting is December 21st. Is everyone available and planning to attend?
Yes.
I will be coming to you from snowy Idaho, but I will be.
Rub it in.
I'm going to Idaho, and there better be a lot of snow. I'm just telling you.
Hope there's good Wi-Fi on the downhill. Yes.
That's right. I'll have a pretty white background one way or the other.
That's right. That's right.
Fred, where are you there? Are you in the Vatican? Where is that?
No, this is actually Clark Hall at UVA.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. It actually,
I've never been in there.
Engineering School of Engineering right now, and if you go through those doors in the back in the center, the engineering library is right in there. And this was the old law school.
Oh, wow. I've never been in there. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great spot. Well, great. Let's see, anything else before we adjourn today?
Any update on a new member?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I meant to say that. I think that I don't know if folks saw, I believe that the board has appointed a 5th member. Is it Christian
new member.
Hinningsworth, I think so.
Christian, you?
I need to take a look back, but I think, yeah, they did recently reappoint, and I think I made a number of reappointments. I think it reminds me, I think we had made an effort to request that the supervisors adjust the appointments so that there would typically be one member turning over each year. And it looks like the way that they reappointed the terms, there's a group of 3 and a group of 2. So I don't know if it's worth revisiting that and whether they can adjust the terms so that there are not simultaneously so many potential absences.
I'll ask about that. I did not get any notice that a new member was appointed, but I will go and ask the clerk of the board again and see if I can get you that information and email it to you.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Great. Well, thank you very much to everybody for a good long meeting today, and we're adjourned. See you on the 21st.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.